We live in a society full of technology. We can use it for almost everything. It's almost a lifeline to us. We have the world at our fingertips. We are no longer left to imagine or wonder. We have instantaneous access to all information that is known. With these advancements, we have the ability to create more realistic media content. We can make everything in the Hollywood and virtual world as realistic and as graphic as technology will allow. Our visual entertainment is becoming significantly more graphic than it used to be, to the point of it being unnecessary. Through extensive research, it has been found that being exposed to the violence depicted in this type of field can affect behavior and thought patterns to some degree. Those exposed have been noted to have an increase in aggressive behavior, fear, depression, nightmares, sleep disturbances, and an overall desensitization to violence that causes a hunger for it. What I mean by that is that violence becomes so normal at a point that it isn't exciting anymore, so the industry amps it up to get that reaction and feeling that the audience once had. Take Mortal Kombat for example. In 1992 the first game was released. If you aren't familiar with it, it's a fighting game that started out as an arcade game. Now it has evolved into something that includes a complete mutilation of the human body. In the game, if you were to win, you have the chance to execute a fatality. In the game, it's basically a super move that puts the opponent down for good. Here are some clips of the fatalities all the way back from 1992, leading up to the 11th game being released in summer 2019.
Kano wins. Flawless victor fatality.
Cage wins. Fatality.
For the Shaolin!
Kung Lao. Lena wins. Fatality.
Which is enough to win the match, and you might have seen a glimpse of this fatality here.
So as you can see, those are no joke. From the visuals to even the sound effects, it's all very gruesome. That is what is being played by not only adults, but children as well. I had the chance to talk to Bakari and LaSonia Wells. They are parents to two young boys who are involved in playing video games. So when I brought this interview opportunity to their attention, they were more than happy to voice their opinion on the matter.
We have a 12-year-old who intellectually is not at a 12-year-old level. He can see things on a video game that he interprets as being normal, and we have to sometimes explain to him that what he sees in those video games aren't normal, especially when it comes to violence. And it also makes them know more about different types of guns and different types of scenarios that they normally wouldn't know about or see generally.
If they're not emotionally sound, I think they have a tendency to not be able to exactly understand fiction from fact.
A huge factor in being exposed to media violence is the amount of time that we spend on our screen. Did you know that the American child between 2 and 18 years of age spend an average of 6 hours and 32 minutes each day using media?
I think it plays, we're laughing because we go back and forth about screen time. I think it plays a huge amount because if they're spending that much time on screen time, then they're not getting a lot of guidance. They're not getting a lot of interaction on the outside. And that affects them tremendously because it just makes it seem as if this is how the real world works. And that's just not how it works.
Well, I think it also relates to interpersonal skills as well, because if they're just reacting or interacting with a TV and they have a headset, it's not real personable. So it transcends later on in life when they try to get a job, or they don't know how to interact with whether it's their coworkers or just the individual who's hiring them. So a lot of screen time, they're not getting personal time. So it's not the same interaction level.
With society's inherent need to constantly be connected to the internet, it goes to show that their habits are part of the problem. Even though the media pushes the violence, the world being so infatuated with their devices leads to the intake of the violence becoming unhealthy.
I think it already has impacted them, but I definitely think it is going to impact them in a very negative way. We are going to have a group of kids and young adults that think you have extra lives and think if I go out here and shoot a person or run a person over, that's just it. They don't think about the consequences. And I sometimes wonder when I hear about violence in young kids, does it have a lot to do with what they see? And do they not really understand how it really works?
This is Tammy Garland. She is a professor for criminal justice at UTC. I got to sit down and ask her a few questions about her thoughts towards our violent media.
When you look at violent video games, yes, that you're killing people. And yes, they can desensitize you to violence, okay? And so when you're going around and you're desensitized, you're probably not as empathetic to violence sometimes. But what's most likely to more likely to cause violence is parents not paying attention to you. If you're a youth and your parents have no idea what you're playing, if you're a 10-year-old kid and you're playing extremely violent video game, then there's probably other issues going on. Okay, so first of all, you have to think of things as age appropriate. You're a senior, obviously, and about to go into the adult world, shall we say? And so you playing video games isn't really as big of a deal. But when you have an 8 to 10-year-old playing violent video games who cannot distinguish what's real and what's not, that becomes another problem. It's not necessarily the video game. It's an unsupervised exposure to violence without understanding what it really means. The overexposure to violence really does desensitize us. And youths really can't process this. You know, a youth, I always say things need to be age appropriate and they need to be guided by parents. But when you have, a kid has a device, 3 devices typically, and they're playing on them, and if it's unsupervised, it does become overwhelming, and they don't know what to do with it. So yes, they're probably more likely to be aggressive. But everything is not sunshine and daisies, and yes, because that's what sells. People like violence. People like things to blow them up.
The frequency of violence in the media is growing rapidly. It is estimated that every year from regular media viewing, you will see at least 10,000 people killed. This leads to a variety of mental health problems when it comes to being exposed. These include aggressive behavior, fear, depression, nightmares, anxiety, and an overall desensitization to violence. We can be desensitized for multiple reasons, one being that violence appears to be justified in the media. If we see a good guy killing a bad guy, we think it's okay, which rolls over into the real world. Here's an example from the very popular TV show The Walking Dead. The protagonist Rick Grimes is held by some bandits, but when they threaten his family, things get a little rough.
What the hell are you gonna do now, sport?
I'll kill him!
Let the boy go. He's mine. Please.
I think the screen time, may not necessarily lead to them actually engaging in violence, but it does cause anxiety. We're seeing a group of children growing up, and they are extremely anxious. And it's because, as I stated earlier, I get overwhelmed by all the amount of violence and the amount of drama that we see over and over again. And when you start looking at this, kids can't process. Their brains, a child's brain doesn't stop developing till it's around 24 years of age. Okay? So when you look at that, and when you look at processing all of this stuff and all of the stuff that makes us who we are, they're growing. And when they're young, they don't know how. If you don't talk to them about it, and you don't assure them that it's okay, and most of it is not real, then it creates this level of anxious. And we're seeing increasing levels of anxiety and depression among youth, and we're seeing, suicide rates increase, and that's sometimes the problem. It does kind of change our attitudes, how we approach violence. It's back to this desensitization, okay? What we see is people who watch a lot of movies and play a lot of video games, watch a lot of television, it's kind of our social construction of reality. We see that as real. We see that, we start letting that influence our beliefs, whether it's on gender issues or race issues, or just how much violence is in the real world. That little Johnny asks for a video game, and mommy and daddy go out and buy this video game, and they have no idea what's on it. Now, should parents supervise? Most definitely. Yes, things need ratings, but it's parents who really should be doing this. And if parents choose, I'm not saying parents are bad for letting their children play things like this, but they at least should have a talk with them that this isn't real. Okay, this is a very fantasized world where violence is acceptable, and it's not so acceptable in reality. So if you play violent video games, you can't go punch your friend, and you're obviously not going to put a sword or something through somebody's head and cut their head off. It can. I mean, it can have very negative consequences, especially kids who are predisposed to mental illness, especially kids who have experienced trauma. I mean, if you've been a victim of domestic violence, this may have a much more likelihood of linking violence, not necessarily causing it, but linking and kind of allowing you to vent your frustrations and maybe take them further.
Going off Dr. Garland's point of the potential of venting frustration and possibly taking things further in the real world, in the gaming world, people get frustrated and begin to rage. It's basically just whenever you get mad at a game, whether it's just due to difficulty or losing, and begin to throw a tantrum. It would typically begin with screaming and yelling, and a lot of times it would lead to breaking things, as you will see in the few clips that I've gathered. The first video is a clip that was found from Dr. Phil, where he is dealing with a child that is addicted to video games, and he is violent with the people that he plays with online and offline with his mother. But his mother proves my research further because she is the root of the problem.
He breaks furniture, he breaks dishes, he has basically destroyed his room.
How would you like your death to be? Death by AIDS?
These violent games have desensitized him from actual pain and death. He has been bullied. I am scared that he will take the behaviors that he's learned in the game and retaliate. He could become another school shooter.
Shut up and leave me alone! Round lost? You guys suck! I'm on a winning streak and it's 0-2! Can you hear me? You guys suck eggs! That's right! Get no scopes! Get no scopes! Come out. Think you're a little stupid. No! No! I shot!
It doesn't look like you're a lot of fun. Oh, you done. That, hold on, kill cam.
Go away! I'm just done with you!
This is exactly the kind of thing the therapist was talking about. Try it again.
Kirsten! Stop! Stop! Kirsten! Quit! Quit! Quit!
Oh my god!
I saw it last week. I went to a local school where there was a large fight that went on, and there was decent amount of violence. But when all the officers have body cams, so you can, as a supervisor, I've got to review those cams. So I saw some of the kids walking around literally like people were doing nothing, playing basketball, and it was a huge fight going on. So I think nowadays they come in contact with it so often that again they just get desensitized from it. So yeah, I agree with that, and I think that also comes from watching video games as well. And again, I think it's sitting down with your kids, maybe playing a game with them, and letting them know that this is just a game, it's not reality. And I think when you do that, and again, if they're mature enough, they can understand that concept.
It all boils down to the type of child that you have. If they're ready for that type of entertainment or exposure. I think exposure. So you really have to think as a parent if your child's ready for that type of.
It's stages.
Yeah.
And I think the games are age appropriate for a reason. If let's just say that they see that and then they don't do exactly that type of action to another individual, but something of that nature, they don't understand the ramifications of that. They think it's like a video game. So I think violence will get worse. Social media doesn't help out. A lot of these games, they got YouTube, and you can literally watch these people play it online. So if you're not playing it, if you're playing it, you can also watch somebody else playing it. So I think it just heightens the effect of the interaction, of the stimuli. So I think it's just not gonna, it's not gonna take a turn for the good. I think it's gonna take a turn for the worse, to be honest with you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
No problem.
Media can be a wonderful, informational, and entertaining tool, but the violence that it has with it is the opposite. The increase in media violence most likely will not get any better because of the hunger that people have for it. Not to say that it's going to cause the world's end or increase violence in everyday life, but it is just being subjected to the content over time that can lead to changes in one's behavior. Desensitization can cause society to overlook violent acts in the real world because of their unrealistic view on the subject, especially with the new generation. The world would be probably better off without people being exposed to media violence, but that is not the case, and it is not causing everyone that is exposed to go viciously kill people. The long-term effects of media violence on society have the potential of being controlled. From what has been gathered, it looks to be that parents are not doing their job to shield their kids from this content, causing an upbringing surrounded by violence that cannot be interpreted properly by a child. Our response to this epidemic should be to understand the dangers of media violence on children, help our children be aware, and try to control exposure to the extent that we can.